Today we would like to introduce Javid. So, in behalf of Google and all of the Googlers, welcome to Google.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hi there. Hello.
Hello.
Okay, so Javid, just so you know, we're expecting something like this.
Yes,
like,
I know.
Do you have instruments or a band or like what?
They're sitting at the back. The rest of the team
backup,
is there.
yeah, like, just like, yeah. I'm kidding. So I'm sure no one's here to hear about me, but I'm just going to briefly introduce you to everyone, and I'll pass the mic. So Javid is probably one of the people we need to hear more of at Google. He's been working in Doctors Without Borders for a very long time, and he's worked in a lot of crisis regions like the Ebola crisis in Sierra Leone, like refugees in Athens. He's also worked around the regions as well, so I'm sure we can learn a lot from what he does. So I think the best way in these talks is to make it a very organic, kind of very open thing. So we'll have Javid talk for about 20-25 minutes, but your feedback is great. I think he also is very curious to know what you guys think about their operations and what they do. So I think we'll be able to have a very nice discussion together. So thank you guys, and off to Javid.
Thank you, Majid. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for having me and MSF here for your what is your inaugural Google talk here in Dubai. So I think that's fantastic. I'm going to give you an idea of what it's like to work on the front line in MSF as a doctor. I'm a doctor myself, and also to give you a chance to ask questions to clear up any ideas you might have. So what I'm going to do over the next it's almost 40 minutes actually, so sorry to shock you. I'll try and keep it down, is give you a picture of what I first did with MSF, Médecins Sans Frontières, and what I last did. And they tie in somehow. But interestingly, I found out today that one of your Google mottos is "Don't be evil." Is that right? Yes. And of course, the first medical ethic is "Do no harm." I don't know if you knew that. So it's potentially, that's a really nice link between Google and Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders. We're a medical organization, and medical ethics are a core value of who we are. And who am I anyway? So I'm an emergency physician. I work in hospital in London, but I also go to the field with MSF. I'm now on the board of MSF UK. We sort of manage ourselves. We can be the governors of the charities. And this is a picture of me on the ship Aquarius taken last summer, about which I'll talk later. I should point it here. Just to really map out what the the founding principles of MSF are what you see there: independence, neutrality, and impartiality. The independence comes from the funding stream, essentially being the Joe Public, and also the fact that we govern ourselves. So people like me who have been in the field, we can put ourselves forward for elections internally to manage the charity, which is what I do currently. Impartiality is a medical thing. Essentially, it's the fact that a human being in front of you, no matter what their religion is, or no matter where they're from, how they got ill or injured, they're your patient. A patient is a patient, and you're the healthcare giver. So you don't ask questions about your patient. That's what impartiality is. So my first experience with MSF, I was 1 year in the field. I was 6 months in Iraq. And while I was in Iraq, there was the Haitian earthquake, which was right at the beginning of January 2010. And in fact, Haiti was the first time Google got together with MSF. You helped with some mapping of the disease of cholera when it struck the country later in the year in October time. And I'll come on to a little bit of the cholera experience there. But this was a difficult experience for me. I had gone there to work in this hospital here. So just look. Oop, wrong button. There's the pointer. Can you see the pointer? This was the medical tent just here. 32 inpatient beds. So I was there to run the internal medicine department that you see there, the emergency room, which is just behind it, and also the intensive care unit. But obviously the standard of care after an earthquake in that sort of setting are not as high as you might expect. So it was really quite challenging. I was seeing a lot of infectious diseases, typhoid, malaria particularly, tuberculosis, HIV, which I had no means to treat, lots of violence, lots of interpersonal violence, and lots of non-communicable diseases, so asthma, diabetes, strokes, heart attacks. So a really wide variety of caseload, but in very difficult circumstances. So despite my having arrived in Haiti in June, I left Iraq I took a month break, arrived in Haiti at the beginning of June, which was already 6 months after the earthquake, but it still looked like this. These are all my pictures. I keep pressing the wrong button. Every building, everywhere, some form of destruction. Really, you can't imagine just every horizon, just rubble and destruction. But people trying to get on with their day. Here are two boys. If the pointer works, you can see two boys there walking past this building, going to school. This picture on the bottom left is just tents. People were living in tents. Yeah, I didn't go anywhere special to take this picture. Every sidewalk, every pavement, you drive to work, this is what you see. Or if they'd managed to get together some money to build some proper shelters, or proper in terms of a bit more solid, you can see there in the bottom right some corrugated tin, because the hurricane season comes on later in the year. It's imperative to try and get a little bit more fixed shelter. But what this paints a picture is that there was no water and sanitation, very hot, very cramped conditions. On a background of where we were working, which is a place called Cité Soleil, which meant Sun City. It's the favela, so to speak, the slum of the capital. And here is our convoy arriving through the gates of the hospital. Very much, the UN wouldn't even go in there. There was no safety for anyone but MSF in such a place because of the gang warfare that was rife there. But because we gave free healthcare and had been there for many years, had free access. So it was, there was a lot of violence. There was a lot of gun crime and a lot of sexual violence that I was treating in my emergency room. So it was difficult. And as you can see there, that picture in the tent, this is one of the doctors. You can see how cramped the beds are. But what we're doing here is, those top two pictures are taken on the same day. Hurricane Thomas was coming in. At this point, the cholera had struck in the north of the country already, but it hadn't yet arrived into the city. But November 4th, we were just packing up the hospital. We had to vacate the lower ground floor. My medical tent had to pack it up. There was no way that would have survived a hurricane. Had to move all the patients, either discharge them or move them up into the hospital first floor. So that's the picture inside the tent, with most of the patients having gone. And we, just four of us there in the team, one of the nurses, a logistician, and the medical team leader and myself, did an extra sort of hurricane night shift in case it should strike the hospital and there were any emergencies at that time. So we stayed in the hospital overnight, but actually the hurricane swerved north at the last minute and really missed hitting the city firmly. But nonetheless, there was a big storm, lots of water, and cholera is water-borne. It's spread through water, and it gives you symptoms of a very profuse diarrhea and vomiting. And the very next day, it essentially washed into the city with Hurricane Thomas and into the slum. And I had just finished that night shift. I was just walking out, and there was a trauma case. A man had been hacked by a group of vigilantes and attacked, and he had been accused, so to speak, of stealing a purse from a woman in the area. And we weren't able to save him. I mean, he was hacked to death. I mean, my clothes were absolutely covered in blood, but luckily, because I had spent the night in the hospital, I had an extra bag, and I changed my clothes. And on the way out to go to the car park, we had situated a pre-triage area. You don't want any patient with cholera to be able to enter the hospital. You know, it's highly infectious. And we had pediatrics and obstetrics. We need to keep all these vulnerable patients separate from the cholera patients. And I went into the tent, and the nurse said, "I think we've got our first cases." And it was 3 children and some parents, and indeed they were cholera cases. And the next day we had 16, and the next day we had something in the mid-20s. And by the end of the week we were approaching 200 cases a day. And it was something that you just, no matter how you think you may be prepared, and it was, you know, my first time in such a field, it was something very, very hard to manage, you know. Patients, when they're sick with cholera, this picture on the top left there, you can see there are holes in the bed. There's a hole in the bed, yeah? And at the top end, so under that hole is a bucket, and at the top end is a bucket. The patients get so debilitated that you just do it in your bed, and your job is to wash them and to get rid of the buckets and fill it with chlorine, because chlorine neutralizes the cholera toxin. And we were building beds. We'd run out of beds, and you put 2-3 children down on a bed just to find space, and people were coming. It's such a violent part of the city that people wouldn't come overnight. It's so dangerous to be outdoors overnight. So there'd be a lull. There'd be a lull overnight, and we were doing our day shift in the hospital and volunteering to do extra shifts in the evening until the emergency pool came to sort of bolster our services. But so overnight you would do little logistical things like the huge buckets at the top left of that top left picture. There are about 200 litres of oral rehydration solution, which is, if you're only a moderate case, you just need to top up. The management of cholera is to avoid dehydration. Okay, it's as simple as that. It'll self-limit up until then, essentially, give or take. But patients lose so much fluids if they're very, very severe. You can see these bags of fluids here. Each one is 1 litre. The normal human need is 2.7, call it 3 litres in a day without extra losses. Yeah, so 3 litres, 24 hours. A severe case of cholera may need 5, 6, 7 litres in the first 2 hours. It's you die in 2 hours by vomiting and diarrheaing your entire body fluids out. It's severe when it's severe, and it's really, really not fun. But the oral, I remember one night a different night, this oral rehydration salt buckets had run out, because if you're a moderate case and you're not vomiting too much, you can drink, and that's the best way to get fluids into you. But those buckets had run out. It was raining. It was about 3 a.m. You know, you've had a long day. It's like, oh my God, why the hell have these buckets run out right now? And there wasn't any of the ready-made solution left. You know, you're chasing your tail. Logistics couldn't keep up. You're building beds. Patients are down. ORS has run out. Make some. You know, so I had to tear each sachet, 200 sachets of oral. I'll put this down. I'm not managing to point. Of oral rehydration salts into this buckets, and then fill it up in the rain. And you're just having one of these moments in your life when you think to yourself, you know, how have I ended up in this situation where it's 3 a.m, it's raining, people are all around me, sometimes you hear gunshots left, right and centre, and it's just, so I had one of those moments where you just question what path you've taken in your life. And I thought, right, I'm going to go to bed for a couple of hours. But before I went to bed, I saw 2 of the cases were really quite on the borderline of switching from those oral fluids, the bucket drinking, to the intravenous fluids. So I told the team members, guys, keep an eye on those 2. They were young girls, actually. Keep an eye on those 2. I'm going to go off for a couple of sleep, have a low index of suspicion for switching to intravenous. And I came back and they were dead. And, exactly, gasp, sigh, and, well, I blamed myself. What can you do, and you have you just think to yourself, my God, I should have just put that cannula in myself, and that children would be alive today. So it's a difficult thing to deal with. I mean, I'm quite sort of all or nothing in that way. You are success or fail, no grey in between, and I've ended up fixing on this negative moment. And it's quite hard because you have to stuff the orifices of a human when they die with cholera with cotton-soaked bleach, and because things ooze out and become infectious. And so I had to hand back this young girl to her mother in the morning. And, you're blaming yourself. And she's looking at you and saying, thanks for trying. So this was an awful moment for me particularly, which I haven't talked about. This is only the 3rd time I've talked about this since 2010. But it was a circumstance, the first time I'd seen, there was no dignity for patients whatsoever. This is a cattle truck. This is how we had to transport patients. This lady was actually pregnant. You sit them on buckets, to move them from a triage area to the actual main cholera treatment centre that we'd built in a football pitch down the road. There was no dignity, and there was fear in the community. There hadn't been cholera for centuries in Haiti. And so when we were first doing transfers during the day, they were throwing rocks, putting burning tires, so we had to do it overnight. And again, you have these night shifts where it's raining, and you're pushing patients like this into a truck, covering the truck with plastic sheeting so no one can see what's inside, and moving them across the city. It's not dignified. It's inhumane. But needs must. It was what we had to do to just try and get anything done for these people. It was a very difficult situation. But that was the last month of my 6 months there. And if I would ever characterize the first 5 months of being just a low-grade assault on my psyche, it was, I wanted to be able to treat strokes, but we didn't have the medication. I wanted to be able to treat heart attacks, but there was no coronary care unit. I wanted to be able to treat these men with tuberculosis, but there were no other actors. It's an earthquake zone. You can't, but when you're faced with these patients and you just say, I know what you have, I know what I want to do for you, but I can't, this is what's going to happen to you over the next few months. A death sentence in a few of the cases. It's hard to deal with. And then the cholera came, and I've just told you how that was hard. So this picture, 1st December 2010, 2010 when I left Haiti, is a happy picture. This is me after a few beers, and flying away the next day, and I haven't given up, and I've done 6 months, and yes, I stuck it to the end, and I was recreating. Here, this was, sometimes you have a few drinks and you think you're funny, but I was recreating how I felt at the end of these 6 months. I felt smashed up and beaten up and run over by an MSF pickup. It was a hard 6 months, and it was also at the end of an entire year in the field, having been in Iraq before that. So I had promised to myself, really actually, not to give up medicine. I had promised myself to give up medicine at that point, which was at the end of 2010, and I tried, but I came back. MSF has this, no matter how difficult it is, there are moments where you just love it so much, and I'll come on to that shortly. But I found this, that night, you saw that tent where that was empty, and I took the picture of the doctor pushing the drip stand. While we were doing that, one of the patients gave me this letter. And he was a young man. I don't think you can actually quite read it there or not. It says, I salute you in the name of he who, through his death, gave us life, Jesus Christ. Dear Dr. Javid. So it's a very eloquently written letter. And he goes on to talk about, if you despise your neighbor, it's a sin, but blessed is he who cares for others. It carries on and it says, I'd forgotten who he was at the time of reading, but he was actually a young man who had a cardiac arrest, respiratory arrest. He had an acute asthma attack. And I remember very clearly being called into the ER to try and help, and I had actually said don't continue resuscitation because we didn't have real intensive care, we didn't have ventilators, we didn't have oxygen, But the staff sort of appealed to me. He's young. I thought, okay, there's one other treatment we haven't tried here. Let's do it. And he had survived. He'd survived well enough with brain capacity to write this beautiful letter to me as a thank you, to say, whatever, you didn't give up on me, thank you. And I think right now, I needed that because I was developing a sense over the years. I came to read this 3 years after I left Haiti, a couple of years ago. I had developed a sense that everything I had done in Haiti was failure. Everyone I saw died. It was difficult. It was work. I was blaming myself for a lot of the deaths, and I found it very hard to deal with mentally. But this guy reminded me in a short, sharp way with this letter, hey, you did okay sometimes. So it's a very important letter for me, and it ends, if I be blessed by God forever. A big thank you to all the staff of MSF, because earlier on he says thank you are the biggest words in the human dictionary. So, and I think it's such a beautiful letter, but I'll share that with you just to say, sometimes it's too easy to fixate on how you don't do well, but others remind you that you may have done okay. That was one of my first experiences with MSF, but my last experience was just last summer on the ship. So despite having tried to leave MSF and leave medicine, how many times I'm still here. I'm still coming back for more, and it's worth it. But what's Aquarius? Aquarius is one of our search and rescue vessels on the Mediterranean. It works just... It works... This doesn't point. No, it does. We work in this area here, just north of Libya, because there are many, many deaths in people trying to cross the Mediterranean towards Europe from Libya. And these are the number of deaths in that search and rescue zone, the SAR, just there. So people on the move coming towards Libya, smuggled or otherwise, getting onto rubber dinghies and trying to cross the sea there. So some 2,892 deaths in that area in 2015, and a good deal more I'll show you shortly. But who are these people? There are many people from failed states, coming from, say, Somalia, Eritrea. There's lifelong military conscription, unpaid. You know, it's a failed state. You're a refugee by definition if you manage to leave that country, and you can claim asylum. Sudan, also from West Africa. So many flow of migrants, people on the move, coming from the Horn, coming from the west, up across the Sahara into Libya and trying to get into Italy there. But what this shows is actually quite how many people there are. So, about 16% of all those numbers that you see arriving, some 25,000 people a month in the summer months arrive into Italy. It's a huge number. Some 16% of those are children traveling alone without their parents. I had a patient who was a 13-year-old boy from Darfur. He clearly had chicken pox. That was why I was seeing him on the ship. Luckily, I'll show you how we rescue people shortly. I had a 14-year-old traveling from Mali, no parents. In fact, his father was in Paris, he told me, trying to reach him there. But large numbers arriving into Italy over the summer months. And this is the number that died in 2016 despite our efforts. And you can see there a good proportion are women and children, so it's not just young men trying to arrive, economic migrants or otherwise. But how do you convert this situation here, which is usually what you're faced with when you're floating in that search and rescue zone off Italy in international waters? How do you convert this into safe bodies on our ship? Because believe it or not, this is a highly risky moment. Right here, right now, that's a highly risky moment for a few reasons. Usually the boats would be fuller than that. Yeah? Often both sides of the boat will be full all along its circumference with people dangling their legs over and sitting for support. So for me, when we see this, we say, why is it not full? Where have those people gone? Why are these people, what's going on with those people just down there? Are they unwell enough, not well enough to stand up? It's tricky. And if you're not careful with the way you perform the rescue, they panic and you have this type of situation. And bodies in water is not cool. 13 died on this rescue. 112 survived. They're given life jackets that when they get wet, soak water and they sink by the smugglers and the traffickers. So it's unscrupulous people getting these people in these boats. This is what you convert that first picture to this picture. This is a lovely, safe moment, and this is what we're doing on the sea now in MSF. So the first boat, I'm actually on the second boat, if I could point, which is the boat on the right, with the white helmet, the middle person there. But the first boat is the boat on the left. Now, if that dinghy doesn't actually try to drive itself away from you when they first see you, because they think you might be Libyan Coast Guard, who are now being trained and paid by European governments to push back these people onto shore. And we'll come on to why that's a bad thing with Libya shortly. So once we get to them, we use a ship's sound system to say, hey, you're safe, we're MSF. And we do it in French, Arabic and English, the three languages mainly of those countries you saw, and Tigrinya is one of the languages of the Horn of Africa. So we get the messages out there, you're safe. And this first boat, our dinghy, our rib, arrives to the dinghy and latches on and doesn't leave them until the last body is off that ship. And they arrive with the first set of life jackets. And then I, with two sea rescue people, arrive on that second rib with more life jackets. Until everyone has a life jacket, we don't board or take someone off. Otherwise it might ensue a panic because they want to be the off first. And all this time, the first rib, the rib on the left, has someone on there in those four languages just saying, stay calm, because otherwise you'll end up with this picture, and you don't want that. And here is another way of looking at that. So there's Aquarius in the background. It might even go upwind of you to block the wind, to calm the waters. It's actually amazing how it does that. And you come and go, and you come and go, and you take the wind. This is me, the back of my white helmet there, and you you take the women off first, or the children, or anyone who looks sick, and you can only fit 18 people on your ribs. So sometimes if it's 190, 200 people on these rubber dinghies, you're going back and forth, that distance to Aquarius. So it can be time consuming. And that's one boat. If the weather has been bad and they've not been able to set off, if the wind is coming onto the shore, it's only a 25cc motor, 200 people on a dinghy against the waves, against the wind, are not going to get offshore. So sometimes they're detained on the shore for days waiting for the weather to improve. And then if you have a good day, you'll have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of these boats, these dinghies to try and save. But there are many ships on the sea, all coordinated by the Italian Coast Guard. 2 weekends ago, 8,300 people saved. But make no mistake, none of those people would have reached Italy. There is no way that rubber dinghy, it's a rubber dinghy, can cross from Libya to Italy. Okay, on our ship it's a 2-day, 2-night sail at steam, you know. There's no way. So, accusations by politicians or otherwise that we're a taxi service. I mean, there's no way these bodies would reach the ship. And they're people who are destitute, no shoes, just the clothing on their back. Why they left their home, multitude of reasons. What happened to them in Libya? Dreadful situation. I'll give you some examples. But when we get them on board, we hand them a welcome pack, a change of clothes. Usually they might be skin infested because the detention in Libya is so awful that they have scabies, they have skin infections. So we take off all their clothes and dispose, give them a fresh pair of clothes, enough nutrition for the first day, which is biscuits. It's light and easy to keep on a boat. But the next day we give them curry and rice. It's much nicer. But on the first day we give them soap, toothbrush, toothpaste, pair of clothes, a blanket and a towel. So this is them queuing, because it can be a bit of a queue to hand that all out. And you're only getting 18 back at a time anyway. So it's a process, it takes time. And as soon as they get on, you tell them, this is where you need to sleep. Men this side, women inside. You can drink water from these blue boxes, it's filtered water. There are the showers. You tell them where we're going, what's going to happen to you when you arrive. You'll meet the UNHCR, the Red Cross is there, you'll be safe. But please don't wee in the portaloos. Because if it gets too full and if the Coast Guard tell us to go to mainland rather than Sicily, it's another 24-hour sail, 400, 500 people on board, 2 portaloos, urine, full, waves, splash, feces, people sleeping on the deck, not very nice. So don't wee in the portaloos. It's like one of our things. Please don't wee in. Anyway, so I'm getting. But there's a lot of logistics about it. But once they're on, they're safe. And they often just sleep. They just sleep. For the first 2, 3, 4 hours, you have this very eerie silence, and you get the impression that they've really, really not had a good night's sleep, at least for the last 3 or 4 or 5 nights, particularly if it was bad weather. So it's quite quiet, those first few hours, but sometimes actually this is the women sleeping in the shelter. You get jubilation. These women had just changed their clothes, finally understood what we were doing. Hadn't quite realized potentially that we were the good guys, and so broke into song. It was beautiful Nigerians, so the Christians singing a very beautiful religious song. But actually this picture is also up here to illustrate another thing, is that when you get groups of young Nigerian ladies like this, they're being trafficked. So they have fallen somehow or have been even knowingly sold by their family or someone else into the sex slave trade, and they are being moved very meticulously in a planned fashion from Nigeria across the desert into Libya, detained and moved on into Europe. And the hotspots, the open detention centres in Italy, where the UNHCR and the Red Cross and everyone receives these people when we arrive in Italy, they're open. And if you are 16, a minor, 14, those 13-year-old I told you about, that's a closed hotspot. They can't get back out into the continent of Europe because they're vulnerable, they're children, you look after them. But the adults, Italy receiving 25,000 people in the summer months for the last 3 years, each year, they're doing a great job in receiving them, but that's a lot of people to receive into your country who have high needs. So for them, it's a good thing to have hotspots, that are open. Adults can get out into the rest of the continent. So the sex traffickers tell their teenage girls to all say they're universally above 21. And they'll all say they're 23 and they're all from the same city and they're all going to do the same thing, and you're just like, yeah, right. And you're given these sort of indicators of vulnerability by the authorities, and we hand them over to them on arrival to try and just take charge of them. But amongst these women, there were 16. 4 had unwanted pregnancies from very recent sexual violations. One of them had been raped the night before. And she said she was 23 when she first talked to us. But on those 2 days, they see that you're kind. They get confident in your good intentions. And she actually said on the second day, actually today's my 18th birthday, and she started to tell me the surprise party she had the year before by her friends in Nigeria, how she wishes she was still there, what a different birthday this is. And it's a moment you have with another human, you know. It's such a interaction I'll always remember, because there she was just being honest, you know, God, what a rubbish situation I'm finding myself in right now compared to last year. I wish this wasn't happening. But then, you know, at least I take away from that moment that she felt comfortable with what we were doing. You know, we gave her a moment of caring. We gave her a moment to say, you're important to us, you know, be warm, be safe, be here today. Here's some food, and here's your... Well, I gave her all the medical need that you need after a rape. And then also we give psychosocial counselling, and I handed her over to our counsellor on land to carry on having mental health. A follow-up, but a lot of cases are beaten. So this guy was a Sudanese professor, he told me. He could speak French and German, and I tested him. And he had been detained 3 or 4 times over a few months in Libya for money. It's extortion. Well, they imprison you, you pay money, you get out. It happened 3 or 4 occasions. On the last occasion, he said, I'm not going to do this anymore. They beat him. And in beating him on his feet with piping, he'd ended up with abscesses and a broken foot. So this is what I was treating here. This guy, a young electrician man, he'd been sold. You know, many reasons for how these people end up in Libya, but then also Libya is so violent and broken now with forced detention. But he'd been sold. Unknowingly to him, he was bundled into a car. He'd been sold to erase a debt, he was told, transported across the desert from Nigeria through Niger, stop over there into Libya. He was forced to work as in an armed gang, stealing livestock from other Libyans, but he refused. An armed gang was an African, so the Libyans were forcing these guys who they bought to then go and be armed robbers, to take the risk of being shot by the Libyan police, but at least to... You see what I'm trying to say. So he refused to do that, and had been detained in solitary confinement, had lost a lot of weight, but they found out that he was a good electrician. He'd done them favours in working, and one guy he was lent to, so he's a possession. He's a slave. He was lent to another guy. He did good work for him. This guy took pity on him and released him. And so I said, well, why didn't you go back to Nigeria? Why didn't you... how did you end up on this boat, on this dinghy? And he said, look at me. I couldn't cross the desert. I can't go all the way back to Nigeria. The sea was just there. I thought I could get to Europe, you know. And you don't think about these, you know, the logistics of crossing the Sahara on your feet or otherwise. I mean, it's, you know, but these numbers, these people are managing them. But he felt he didn't have the strength to get back. And again, when we get to Italy, as I said, so we arrive in port and we... hand them over to the authorities, as I described, and they get safety, but not necessarily a ticket to stay. Of course, some people, their asylum is processed and they're sent home. Some people, it's processed and they're allowed to stay. But this is the lives disembarking. And then we go out to sea again. It's really there's a big workload. A lot of lives to save, as I said, some 8,300 just 2 weekends ago. But some beautiful sunsets out at sea. Even here in Dubai, I saw one yesterday. But that wasn't my really last experience. My last experience was that I went back to Haiti in March, just a couple of months ago. I was lucky enough to be able to go back to help the teams in place to organize a debate about how to move forward. It's how we organize ourselves. It's part of our independence to debate how we move forward and open new projects. And this is the team there. But what I found is, remember I said to you that, I showed you that tented ward that I was working in post-earthquake? What I found was this. This is one of our 3 projects there. This is a porter cabin hospital, but nonetheless, this is a 100-bed trauma unit. This is the center of excellence now in Haiti for trauma, be it orthopedic or otherwise, so car crashes, gunshots, and it's an MSF hospital. And I remember when I was in Haiti, we discussed what should we do as a legacy. How should we? What are the biggest needs here? And we identified this as one of the things. And here I was coming back 7 years later to see, wow, we've gone from that tented structure, and that was my whole memory of Haiti, to something like this. And it was so clean inside; it was amazing. So this is a really positive thing for myself to have found that MSF is able to do there. And also I found that we have opened up an obstetric hospital with neonatal intensive care, so newborns, and a sexual health clinic. Again, because we were seeing so much sexual violence. So this is one of the only clinics in the country that takes that into account, doing psychological care, physical care, and actually social care, empowering the women to find a means of earning money so that they don't have to go back to where the assault occurred, which is a new thing for MSF to do, but I'm really pleased to see it. And I was really surprised to find that the clinic was in the house that I'd lived in Haiti. So that picture where I was run over by the car, that was in the driveway of our house, Amina, Alpha Mike. Our houses have names because you need to tell the radio station for safety that we're going to X and Y location. So this is me at the entrance in Alpha Mike just a few weeks ago. Just shocked and surprised to see that, my old bedroom was now the psychosocial team headquarters. And it's just like, oh, wow, okay. So really positive change, from that awful place that I lived for 6 months and that tented hospital to things like this. So I had a little bit of closure and a bit of a very positive ending for Haiti. So I'm pleased to report that back rather than to be too moody about everything that I've said. But one thing I take away from the things that I did in Haiti, from that letter, from, for example, what I've told you on the ship, is about these moments of care that I'm afforded. I'm so lucky to be able to, doing what I do with MSF, to really be able to, as the way I see it, there are 7 billion universes on this planet. We each live in our own universe. Do you ever look at someone when they sneeze and you think, oh, they've just had a moment in their life? No? I don't know, I do that. I'm like, oh, that guy just sneezed. He's having a moment. So, for me, what MSF does for me is I'm able to have a moment with somebody else, and that moment is when they seek healthcare, and I'm luckily able to provide that healthcare through MSF. But you get to spend a moment with that person, and it's their life, it's their universe. God knows where they've come, where they're going, what they're hoping to do, what they've lost, what they hope to gain. Each of these people I've talked about, all those numbers, sadly the dead ones, they're each a person. Just like you woke up today and you go, oh, my back hurts, oh, I have to go to work. Yes, it's Thursday, tomorrow's the weekend. Each of those people have those thoughts every minute of every day. So when you see numbers, try to remember that. And when I think, we say, yes, we did 800,000 cesareans last year across the organization. Yeah, but that's a woman having her child. That's fantastic. You know what I mean? It's just so positive. So I've been able to have a positive ending with MSF finally. And of course, you guys, through your collaboration with us over so many years, and most recently what you actually did in this office, are enabling that. So it's fantastic. So I'm really here to say thank you for that and have shared that experience with you. I will play this video as a thank you.
présentant le symbole de Ebola ici, parce que moi je suis le premier guéri et elle est la dernière guérie.
Yeah, so a real big thank you from MSF, thank you from me, thanks for listening. And just a few points of connection, but I don't need to tell a bunch of Google employees how to connect on social media with MSF, I think you know. But if you're interested, MSFC is the Twitter live, you get a lot of information there about the sea rescues. MSF field will be from any other field. Is this not, yeah, gosh, you could hear me though, yeah? An MSF field is from any other field, and we call it the field when you're on assignment. And the UAE Twitter is the Arabic one, along with Instagram there. But thank you very much.